Now it's time for our second one. This one, it's approximately 1/3 of the population can't snap their fingers, which doesn't surprise me because it took me a long time to figure out how to snap mine. So now we're dealing with a fraction. So there's different ways we can present this visually. I think the most interesting way, and since there's only broken into thirds, basically 1 out of 3, that's really easy to graphically show. If this was 23 out of 87, it might be a little bit more challenging to show, but since this is very simple, I thought about having 3 snapping finger icons. Let me go ahead and draw this, and then have a simple kind of phrase below it. So kind of a very simple pictorial way to show off this statistic. So what we need to do is find snapping hand icon. We've used a picture in the previous one, so let's shake it up a little bit and use the icon. So we can draw our own hand using the pen tool, but to save time, I went ahead and found this great vector resource. You can go ahead and download it. It doesn't have a snapping person snapping their fingers because it's really hard to illustrate, but we're going to do that ourselves. We're going to go ahead and open up this document and grab this icon right here, and we're going to modify it. So I have this over here. I'm just going to copy and paste it. Go ahead and make it a lighter color so I can see what I'm doing. And we're going to make this a snapping finger. So we're going to kind of do it up like you would kind of present your hand to snap. And we're going to add a couple little kind of squiggly lines to indicate sound. And so the best way to do that, to make it look like organic little hand-drawn squiggly lines, I'm going to grab the brush tool over here, and I'm also going to make sure I have the brush window open so I can change the brush size. So the brush size is pretty big, so we don't need that. Let's go ahead and get a nice light color, and we're going to reduce the brush size a little bit, so when you have the brush panel open, you'll be able to change the stroke size. So let's do a 0.25 up here, and it made it a little bit smaller. Let's continue to make it smaller. Let's zoom in so we can do this. We'll do 5 little squiggly lines. Just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that just indicates the snapping sound. We can also indicate it from kind of down here. That might make a little more sense. Let's kind of rethink this a little bit now that I'm seeing it in real life. Let's kind of make it come from the thumb. That's where you hear the snapping. As you can see, it took me a lot of noodling to find the right kind of flow for the indication of the snapping sound from the finger, but I think I got it. If I want to go ahead and select these as to what we created with the paintbrush tool, let's go ahead and go to Object, Path. Let's go ahead and outline the stroke on that. So that's now, when I scale it up or down, it's not going to change in size and give us any problems. So now I can go ahead and select these, take our eyedropper tool and sample our lighter color. So now we have our icon. I'm just going to group that together so I can shift these around. So this one will be a lot more simple to do. We're going to do 3 different ones. We're just going to hold down the Option key, drag, release, and we're just going to do 3 different icons. We're going to make sure they're aligned properly. So I'm just up here in my Align panel. I'm going to align them a few different ways. Oops. I'll make sure I do the horizontal distribute center. So now they're all aligned properly. So let's do the first one. We could do the middle one a different color, but I think the first one kind of makes it more obvious that it's a fraction. So now we can kind of go to our color palette and see if there's a nice, bright, vivid color we can use for this. Perhaps maybe a dark orange. That kind of really pops out there. So that's kind of it when it comes to kind of displaying this. Maybe we can make it a little bit bigger. And go ahead and bring in our type here. I'm going to copy and paste it so I still have the original. I'm going to use the eyedropper tool, and I'm going to see if I can sample the size of the one we just did and the colors, just to kind of be consistent with our type. Okay, and so we can, of course, highlight certain ones. So 1/3. We can make this a fraction and show it as a fraction. Instead of just saying 1/3, we actually have the fraction. So we can do that. I'm going to create my own fraction here. Make that bold, weight. And we can do it a fraction a traditional way. We could do it diagonal. However you want to show a fraction. So we're just doing a simple 1/3 fraction. Make that thicker, maybe a little shorter. Make sure all these are aligned in the center. Make it smaller. So in terms of position, we can make that diagonal and might be able to make it more streamlined. And so now it can kind of be an icon here. This can even be in the orange circle to highlight the fact that that's the one out of the three people in the population that can't snap their fingers. Make that white, just trying to find high contrast items. Perhaps there's a gradient that has orange in it that might look a little softer. So I'm just getting one that has a little bit of a softer gradient tone to it. We could do stylize. We could really stylize this as much as you want. I'm going to go in, get around the corners just a little bit. Just have the direct selection tool, get around the corners there. So instead of a sharp, it's got a nice pill shape. Kind of matches the pill shape we've been doing. I can even do that with my type. I can right click, create outlines. I can even soften the edges of my type. Doing the same method, grabbing the direct selection tool and softening my type just a little bit. So now you can see the type is softened, and maybe I don't need to soften it quite as much. Just the tiniest little bit. So maybe we can make this that softer gradient tone. Kind of get it to match. So approximately 1/3 of the population can't snap their fingers. So that's the more important thing to highlight. So let's get our eyedropper tool and sample what we had over here. It'll be green, but we can always tweak the color. Let's tweak the color and make it kind of that orange color that we see. So now we can play around with type, and to see what looks better, we can do kind of a staggered presentation with our lines. We could make it bigger. I know that will kind of be different than what we had before. Let's go ahead and bring our other one back in so that we can see how they look together. So that's the first one, and this is the second one. So I'm kind of seeing, I like the snapping fingers, but this thing is definitely not jiving, not working. That's okay. So perhaps we can just stick with making this a different color. That's why it's great to kind of see these together, so you can have kind of a matching theme. We can even do the same coloring. Doesn't have to be different colors, just kind of doing that to show you variety. But we can adapt this green or the purple so that all the infographics will match in color, which is important. And maybe that stays white, maybe the line is green, 1/3. And I think we can play with this quite a bit. So I'm going to spend a few minutes to try to figure out this fraction, what's the best layout for that, and maybe kind of fine-tune colors. But overall, I like the idea of having the 3 different icons represent the fraction. I think that's a lot better than just showing a fraction. Kind of shows you a visual image of that. So I spent about 15 additional minutes tweaking the layout, and it came up with this. I decided to keep kind of with the circular theme. We don't have to do that for everyone, but I have this little no symbol that I created. It's just a circle and a line with some thick strokes, and just kind of made it really blend into the background, but yet still communicate that no, that this is 1/3 that cannot snap their fingers. So kind of re-emphasizing what the 1/3 part of the fraction was, which is the cannot. So approximately 1/3 of the population cannot snap their fingers. I highlighted snap their fingers. I'm keeping everything that relates to the one out of the 3 in orange, so they can all connect the one finger, the one number 1, and then the words. So connecting all those with color and not using too much color to distract, but really kind of honing in, trying to communicate this as clearly as possible. So that's how we got to kind of this one. We're going to be ready for the third one. We can maybe do some different things, some different approaches. Let's kind of check out what it is. The state of Florida is bigger than England, so once again we can do kind of a comparison. This time we can actually do on scale. We can find some vector images of England and Florida and lay them over top of each other, try to find it to scale if we can, and kind of do kind of an interesting take on that one.